Before we begin, just a brief note for those who follow this work closely. Subscribers to the Echoes of Valor email list, receive carefully researched ebooks, detailed videos showing real woodworking projects built step by step, and timber-related material that isn't published publicly. The purpose here is to preserve knowledge and document practice, not to market shortcuts. What follows stands on its own, but, well, the deeper archive lives there. One of the quiet reasons old wooden buildings survived is that, honestly, they were never truly rigid. Modern construction, on the other hand, often treats movement as a flaw to be eliminated. Walls are locked in place, joints are tightened until nothing can shift, and really success is measured by how still a structure appears when it is new. Old builders, you see, worked from a different assumption, and they knew that wood would move no matter what they did. Shrinkage, swelling, compression, and creep were not hypothetical problems. They were daily realities. Instead of fighting that movement, they designed for it. Many historic wooden structures that still stand today do not survive because the wood was better or the craftsmanship more precise in a modern sense. They survive because the builders accepted motion as inevitable and allowed it to happen in controlled, predictable ways. Wood begins changing the moment the tree is cut, and it never truly stops. Old builders didn't really speak in technical language, but they certainly understood the long behavior of timber. As wood dries, it shrinks across the grain, and as humidity rises, it swells again. Seasonal cycles repeat this process year after year. Under load, wood compresses slowly and, continues to deform long after construction is finished. Trying to restrain these changes creates internal stress. Old builders saw the results when restraint failed: split beams, torn joints, warped frames. Over generations, they learned that buildings lasted longer when wood was allowed to adjust gradually rather than being locked into a fixed position. This understanding shaped everything from joint design to layout and material selection. Joinery was really shaped to guide movement instead of stopping it, which is kind of fascinating. Traditional joinery did not aim for immobility. Mortise and tenon joints, housed joints, and scarf joints were cut to seat firmly under gravity and compression, not to clamp parts together permanently. As a structure settled, these joints tightened naturally. When humidity changed, they could relax slightly without losing alignment. The geometry of the joint carried the load, not friction alone, which is, honestly, a clever bit of engineering. As this meant that small changes in dimension did not translate into sudden failure. The joint adapted along with the timber. Wooden pegs reinforced this system. Pegs flexed under stress and absorbed movement that would otherwise concentrate at the joint shoulders. If the peg failed, it did so gradually and could be replaced without dismantling the structure. Old builders really avoided trapping wood in conflicting directions. One of the most damaging mistakes in wooden construction is actually restraining wood across its grain. Those old builders, they learned to avoid this through hard experience. Floorboards, for example, were allowed to expand side to side, and wall panels would float within frames. Roof planks were overlapped or pegged in ways that allowed sliding, which is quite clever, really. Even in heavy timber frames, beams were oriented so that seasonal movement occurred where it caused the least harm. Grain direction mattered a lot. Growth ring orientation mattered too. Timbers were paired so that they moved together instead of pulling against each other. This wasn't about perfection, not at all. It was about compatibility over time. Fasteners were chosen for restraint where it mattered and freedom where it didn't. Before widespread metal fasteners, builders relied on gravity, mass, and geometry, and when iron fasteners were used, they were placed carefully, Nails and straps were often positioned where movement was minimal or predictable. They were rarely used to restrain wide boards across the grain. This restraint discipline prevented stress accumulation. Structures could settle without tearing themselves apart. When movement occurred, it was distributed rather than concentrated. Later construction often reversed this logic, using fasteners to force alignment rather than guide it. The result was faster assembly, but, a shorter service life. Buildings were designed to settle, not remain frozen in time. Foundations moved, posts compressed into the ground, roofs shifted under snow and wind. Old builders expected this and accounted for it. Frames were assembled slightly proud, knowing that weight would seat joints over time. Openings were sized to accommodate future movement. This is why many historic buildings show evidence of settlement without collapse. The structure changed shape, but it did not lose integrity. Movement was anticipated and absorbed. Modern expectations of permanence often ignore this reality, treating any movement as failure rather than adaptation. Moisture management depended on allowing wood to breathe and, dry evenly. Forcing wood into rigid assemblies often traps moisture, which is not ideal. Old builders understood that decay followed stagnation, so they allowed air to circulate, and they avoided sealing joints completely. Loose-fitting joints that tightened under load also allowed drying during dry seasons. This, in turn, reduced long-term moisture content and, slowed decay. When wood was prevented from moving, moisture became trapped and decay accelerated. Many historic failures, interestingly enough, were caused by later attempts to fix movement. A common pattern in old structures is that failure often follows repair rather than the original construction itself. When rigid reinforcements are added or fasteners are introduced, or even when members are replaced with timber of a different moisture content, it can disrupt the original movement patterns of the building. What had once been a flexible system, it became constrained. Stress would concentrate at these new, rigid points, and over time, damage would appear where none had existed before. Old builders, they were really quite cautious about introducing rigidity. They understood quite wisely that the building was a system, not just a collection of parts. Letting wood move was, honestly, a philosophy, rather than just a technique. Underlying all of these practices was a mindset shaped by long observation. Old builders didn't believe they could simply dominate the material. Rather, they believed they had to cooperate with it. Wood was respected as a material with its own rules. This philosophy made structures resilient rather than brittle. When conditions changed, the building adapted instead of breaking. That mindset is still relevant wherever wood is used for long-term shelter or survival. Modern tools did not change how wood behaves, only how quickly we forget. Kiln drying, engineered lumber and precision tools have reduced variability, but they have not eliminated movement. Wood still responds to environment. It still shrinks, swells and creeps. Ignoring that reality leads to the same failures seen centuries ago. Historic builders did not have better wood, they had better patience. Understanding how they allowed wood to move is not about copying old methods blindly. It's about understanding why those methods existed and what they reveal about the material itself. Knowledge of wood behavior is really a form of long-term thinking. In restoration, in remote construction, and, even in survival contexts, allowing wood to move can mean the difference between durability and, honestly, constant repair. Structures that adapt last longer than those that resist change. Old builders left behind more than buildings. They left behind evidence of a way of thinking that prioritized longevity over speed. That way of thinking still has value. Wood rewards cooperation and punishes force. The lesson running through historic wooden construction is consistent. Wood will move whether we allow it or not. When movement is guided, structures endure. When it is restrained, failure is delayed but inevitable. Understanding this is not nostalgia. It is material literacy. If this kind of long-form, material-focused knowledge matters to you, consider joining the Echoes of Valor email list. That is where the deeper research, extended documentation, and detailed timber studies are shared, quietly, carefully, and with the time they deserve.